In this video, I'm just going to walk you through some of the options in the program. Let's click the Options button here in the upper right to bring up the Options dialog. And I'm just going to walk you through the various option tabs in the program. The first General Settings tab just has some basic options about how to start with Windows and whether when you click the Close button in the upper right, Screenshot Captor will minimize to the system tray, which is the default. Then you've got an option here for how much memory should be used when it is minimized. So if you use the program a lot, you might ask it to stay in memory. If you rarely use it, you might choose the minimal memory option. Saving and loading dialog. Normally the program will save an image every time you take a screenshot. It will be automatically saved. If you prefer working in a mode where you're taking lots of screenshots and discarding most of them, you might check this button. By default, when you make changes to a file and then switch away from it, you'll be asked whether you want to save the changes or abandon them. That's controlled here. The program will remember the last active region that you had selected and restore that when you load an image. And when you use the save as function to save in a different directory, this controls whether that new directory will open. We've got lots of hotkey options. So in the top we have the standard print screen hotkeys, and then in this panel we've got custom hotkeys you can set for each of these functions. And then this is just sort of stuck here on this tab, which is the size of a region if you would do a fixed size region capture here. That's how big the capture will be. When you save an image, by default you can choose here what file format to save as. PNG is the standard for screenshots. It's lossless and offers pretty good compression. For some of the file formats you've got different compression levels. You can set the DPI for images captured, which won't affect on-screen display but will affect how big the image appears if you drag and drop it into a program like Microsoft Word or a desktop publishing program. And then you've got some transparency background effects. Normally inside the program it knows what's a transparent background, which will show through if you put it on a web page. But if you're pasting it into a program that doesn't understand transparency, you may choose this flatten method, which will basically make the background a fixed color of your choice. Interface options. This is fairly important. There are two real main ways you can use the program. One is to use this pop-up choice dialog, which I'll go into in a subsequent screencast, and the other is just to bypass the pop-up dialog and either show the main window or stay minimized. Stay minimized is useful if you're capturing lots of screenshots. Then the program won't bother you every time you take a new image. You'll just hear a capture sound and go on your merry way. If you do choose to use the pop-up dialog, which shows you options like sending an email or copying to clipboard, you can choose whether to close that right away after you make an operation. Then you've got some options for the side thumbnail panel on the left. You've got an option here about when to apply smoothing to the image. So when you scale down or scale up an image, the program can smooth that a little bit, which looks a little nicer but can be a little time consuming depending on the speed of your processor. So you've got some options there. You've got options of how fast the zoom occurs when you scroll the mouse wheel. And then you've got the navigation panel over here, which is controlled by this option here, whether to automatically switch between these two depending on your zoom. You've got the canvas background color. Let's see, what else have we got? This is going to be a long screencast. We've got the folder where your screenshots are stored. By default, that's set to be called screenshots, either in your documents and settings directory or under your program files if it's a portable install, but you can customize that. You can customize the external image editor, which I'll show you in a subsequent screencast. You can customize a file explorer for when you open a browser. If you install the Unicode Image Maker third-party tool, you can configure that here. I'll demonstrate that in a separate screencast. And if you've got a custom clip art directory, you can specify that here. You can also specify a whole set of external tools for a menu, which I'll show you in a subsequent screencast. Pre-capture options. You can control some of these through the menus and system tray menu, but basically you can set up a delay for capture, which can be useful when you need to perform operations inside an application after you start the capture going. You can hide the main window once you initiate a capture. You can choose to capture the cursor, and you can set up a repeated capture. So if you want to capture an image every second or 2 seconds, you can have it capture a sequence of images and then stop. Post-capture options. Often you'll be doing some operation and you'll want to capture a whole bunch of screenshots and have the same effects applied to them. So here are just a variety of settings you can have for what happens every time you make a new capture. So you can copy the image or file path to the clipboard, launch the external editor, play a sound, select the active window, automatically print. So if you're doing lots of captures that you always want to print, you would check this option. Every time you make a capture, it would be sent to the printer. You can choose to have the system tray display the name of the file captured, which is useful if you've instructed the program to stay minimized. You've got some effects you can automatically apply to a capture. And then if you really want to do some advanced stuff, you can set up some command line tools that should run every time you make a capture. For example, you could set this up to FTP your files or to do some watermarking, etc. Red box capture. I'll show this in a separate screencast, but there's basically a special set of functions within the program that lets you do the object capture mode. If you remember in a previous screencast, that's the mode where a red box is shown over each Windows object as you move it around. You've actually got some options that you can control here, and you can actually use that red box mode to capture regions. I'll demonstrate that in a subsequent screencast. File naming template. One of the useful things about Screenshot Captor is how it will automatically name screenshots files. And here you can configure the way in which that's done. You can see here I've got it configured to put in the file name screenshot and then add the date and time, and then in the comments of the image file it will add some extra information, the file name, the window title, and you've got a bunch of different ways you can configure that. Special effects options. These affect the way in which some of the borders and shadows are applied, and you can see you can configure the shadows and the borders. You can experiment with this stuff to see what parameters you like best. Move to folder list. Here's the list of directories that appear in the Move to menu here. So these are directories, you can list as many as you want, that you frequently want to move files to. So if you're doing a lot of screenshots and maybe there are several different kinds of things you do with the screenshots, you might add different directories here that you can quickly move stuff to. You've got your email send to list. You saw this in the screencast about emailing. Here you can configure predefined email addresses, subjects, and titles, as well as your SMTP email configuration. This is very useful if you're sending lots of emails to the same addresses. You've got options here for how objects are saved. I explained in a previous screencast how objects remain editable after you save images, and this controls the various ways that that's performed and whether anti-aliasing occurs, which smooths out objects on the image. And then we've got scanner options, which is a new feature of Screenshot Captor that allows it to do some scanning functionality, and I will talk about that in a subsequent screencast. And there you have the options of the program. It's a bit overwhelming at first, but everything is set to defaults that should be fine for the first time user, and you can come in here and explore when you're ready to do some customization.